So I've done a couple of podcasts now about mindfulness and the benefits of it, and it's something that is definitely a part of my life. But I wanted to explore something else as well, and that's meditation. It's something I try and do every day. But I thought I would try and seek out an expert on the topic. So I reached out to the hosts of the website, theunusualbuddha.com, and that is Jim Martin and Nelli D, and asked if they would have a chat with me about meditation. Jim is also the author of the Practical Meditation Journal, so I thought that between them they would be a great source of information about something that I find very beneficial. Although Jim doesn't like to talk about benefits as such, but it's something that can certainly help you navigate your day-to-day life perhaps a little bit easier. So we had a great conversation. We're in lockdown at the moment because of COVID-19, so this is done by Zoom, and I'm still getting the hang of Zoom. And obviously there are technical issues. You're reliant on people's internet connections and that sort of thing. So apologies for the sound on this and for any glitches or delays or anything like that. But I hope that you enjoy this conversation with me, Jim Martin, and Nelli D, all about meditation. All right, so Jim Martin and Nelli D, thank you so much for being guests on my podcast, because I meditate every day. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at it, but Jim, you've literally written the book about meditation, and together you are the brains behind theunusualbuddha.com, which is a site all about the benefits of meditation and I guess looking inwards and that kind of thing. So I was wondering if you could shed some light on what the benefits are of meditation, why it's a big deal, what's important about it, and how it can be useful for us. And maybe start with your own stories. How did you get into it? That sort of thing.
I'm sorry. There we go. So first off, I just want to, my name is Jim from theunusualbuddha.com. I just want to apologize. There's the lawn guys are out cutting the grass right now, so this could get a little interesting sound-wise. But actually, I founded The Unusual Buddha mainly because it was like one of those things to scratch your own itch. You can't find what you're looking for, so you have to kind of make it.
Yeah.
A lot of what's out there, what's offered to people, is a little off-putting for some. Not all of us are into the flowery kind of platitudes, you know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, like I like a nice flowery quote with picturesque tree and sunset or whatever. That's cool, and sometimes it's okay, but that's not, to me, that's not an everyday life kind of thing. That's not something I can sustain. So
yeah.
Mainly what I wanted to do is poke fun at what is out there and what is currently, I guess, served as the meditation world, and to show people that it's practical. It's not something you have to, it doesn't have to look a certain way. Yours can be different from mine, and that's fine. It can be, not to say cherry picked, but more or less, you can get eclectic with it as long as you are, seeing those, I don't want to say seeing benefits, because I don't like the idea of going out to, for that as an aim, but the fact that you are, you feel you're gaining something from it, you feel that there is a growth happening inside from it, and that's really where we started. And I guess I let Nelli tell her side of the story.
Well, Jim I approached him to become a moderator in a group that we ran as a sideline to the Unusual Buddha. I think that was in like 2014, 2015. And then eventually it just kind of fostered into this friendship, and we've been working together ever since. So it's been quite lovely. For me, I appreciate the Unusual Buddha and what we're doing because it's keeping it real, right?
Yeah.
It's keeping the grounded side of spirituality, and that nothing is right and nothing is wrong. It's your practice, so it is what you make it, right?
Yeah. Completely.
And yeah, and so that's been really cool to see that foster.
Because I mean, the way I've kind of seen it is we have this thing, mind, body, spirit, right? So you know, you go to the gym to look after yourself and to look after yourself physically, but that's only part of the picture to living a kind of healthy life. You also need to think about yourself mentally, and you also need to think about yourself spiritually. And from kind of spirituality point of view, I don't mean like fairies and pixie dust and stuff like that. I'm just talking about kind of who we are inside, this kind of our spirit, you know.
Yeah.
And
No fairies and pixie dust. No.
yeah, no, exactly. I mean, if that works for people, that's absolutely fine. But what I like about the unusual Buddha is it is just, it's like a practical approach to it. But why do you think we need meditation? Why do you think it's so important?
I personally think it's kind of like you were saying. It's almost I like to look at it like as a mental hygiene almost.
Yeah,
You're kind of getting in there. You're knocking loose some things, maybe pointing out some things about yourself you didn't know, maybe some things about yourself that when you truly look at them that need work. And I think it's not something that's limited to the crunchy granola eating hippies. It doesn't have to be that kind of thing. It can be a very fluid and mobile kind of thing. I personally think it and again, like I said, I try not to tell people about meditation in the form of the benefits, because I feel like it kind of makes people get very narrow in their approach to it. It's almost like if you're looking for a specific side effect of something, you're going to find it, or you're going to at least compare yourself to that. So I personally like to tell people that it's about a more intimate relationship with the present moment and a more intimate relationship with what's really going on inside.
yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I've spoken to people who've said, I've tried meditation, but it didn't work for me. And it kind of made me think, well, what were you expecting? You know, what are you aiming to get out of this? Because for me, meditation is just like, it's like taking a break. You know, it's not like I'm exercising a muscle or I'm trying to get stronger or anything like this. All I'm doing is taking a break. And that can be as valuable as, you know, anything else. It's just kind of saying, right, pause for a minute. Let's just stop everything and, you know, collect ourselves rather than just letting this thing roll on and roll on out of control. And I think that's why it's difficult for people. They're expecting some kind of big epiphany or big kind of, like you say, some benefit or some result. But actually there's, you know, you don't gain anything necessarily, but you lose a lot of stuff. You lose a lot of stress and anxiety perhaps. But it's different for everyone, I suppose. But I mean, for you guys, when did it become such a big part of your life rather than just something you do? When did it become something that was so important to you?
For me, it was in my early 20s. Um, I was struggling with depression and anxiety. And so my my counselor was like, "Hey, have you tried meditation?" And I was like, "Ooh, I can't do that," because I had come from a very evangelical background, and meditation is,
Yeah,
ooh, very frowned upon. And I was like, "Oh, I can't do that." And my counselor was like, "No, there's nothing woo woo about it. But it'll help keep you grounded and present, you know." And so I sought out. There was a guy in our local. He was a monk, and he was teaching through our local schools. They did night classes, and so he was doing meditation classes through our schools. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not going into any kind of temple. My soul's not going to be sucked from my body sitting in a school. So, okay. And I went, and it was not what I was expecting at all. Because, yeah, like you said, people go into it with these expectations when in fact you end up losing your expectations, which is kind of nice, you know?
yeah. And maybe that's why it's so difficult to encourage people to do it, because there's almost like there's nothing to sell here. There's no kind of, you know, it's not going to make you,
Exactly.
you know, can't make you slim. It can't make you successful. It's literally just sitting and breathing. Or as Jim, you pointed out in your book, there are lots of different types of meditation. There are walking meditations. There's so many different ways of doing it. And well, I guess it's limitless the number of ways you can do it. And you pretty much explored all of them, I should imagine.
Absolutely. I would even say there's probably is every person can put their own little flavor on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's you say it's kind of often associated with this whole kind of woo-woo thing. How do you make it more accessible and more practical for people?
I think one thing I tried to start with was poking fun at the, like I said, the standard depiction of it, the standard I guess presentation of it. Because I know me personally, I started also similar to Nelli. I was I think I actually started more from the philosophical side. I actually had a book and I was reading the philosophy. I'm like, wow, this is really deep. And I started meditating and just kind of liked the way it was going. So I just kept with it. I got more serious in my mid 20s. Yeah, I think I'm sorry, I totally lost my train of thought.
All right. That's
in the background. A raptor noise happening. So
absolutely.
Well, I find that one of the ways that we've been able to reach out to people, especially just the everyday person who's kind of curious about it. The page, The Unusual Buddha, has helped with that, and Jim has posted, live meditation classes, or at least links to Zoom classes, and so that the practice itself can be demystified, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that the appropriate term? Yeah. And sorry, I've kind of taken over.
I totally agree. I think that's a really worthwhile statement because it's. I'm sorry, I'm going to step on you. Go ahead.
No, I'm totally taking over the conversation. That's me.
That's cool.
You go ahead.
But yeah, I like the way Nelli said it, demystifying it, because it seems like so many people are trying to turn this into like a proprietary, my school of meditation, my guru, my whatever kind of teacher you have, whether it's a secular Buddhist teacher, they're always trying to put their brand on it. I mean, me personally, I only do 4 types because I only really understand the 4 types that I do. Like, that's it. I don't, not that I'm not interested, or not that I, who knows, maybe chakra meditation could be way cooler and I just haven't really invested in it yet. But I mean, this is, I think what I like or I guess the way Nelli and I do it, I like the way we keep it as more of like a journey, it's like, we're not certified. I don't have any, there's no plaques on my wall saying I know how to do this. I'm just, like, hey, this is what I've found and what I've done over the last 10 years. Maybe it'll work for you, and let's have a laugh. I think that's important. We don't tend to, people tend to take it so seriously, and it's just painful and dry. And like, you don't excite new people by being like, I guess the word's overly pedantic about like how many consonants you put in the word and how many different accent marks are over the S's or whatever. Like, who cares? It's just like you said, Chris, it's sitting and breathing. Is it, do we need to get it more complicated than that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really interesting because there is this whole kind of idea of it's owned by a particular group, or there's one way of doing it, or there's, if you're not kind of having a really good session and clearing your mind completely, then you're doing it wrong. I mean, it is different for everybody, and everybody has their reasons for doing it, I guess.
Yeah. I also find that when you classify it in some way, you're kind of cutting people off.
Yeah.
Because the average Joe will become intimidated by it rather than embracing it, and so I think that's also important to keep in mind. For the general population, is that it's not unobtainable. There we go. Look at me. It's not unobtainable at all.
Words are hard sometimes.
They are hard. It's all this social distancing. I'm not used to talking anymore, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's weird, and especially this whole Zoom thing. It's new to me, and I mean, I've always done it face to face, done these podcasts face to face, and I was worried that when I started doing Zoom and talking to people remotely like this, you would lose that connection, that kind of intimacy that really helps the conversation flow. So I'm trying really hard to kind of try and replicate that here as much as possible, but not easy.
You're doing great.
Oh, thanks. It's only my second time at this.
You do it really well. This is the only way really Nelli and I can do this kind of thing, because she lives in Canada and I live in the eastern seaboard of the U.S. So we're, what is that, Nelli, like 15 hours apart, I would say.
Wow.
Same
so.
time zone, but I think something like 12, 10, something, many hours too. You know, as an American, I'm the typical kind of American. I have no real spatial perception of where things are in the world. So Nelli helps me with that a lot of times, talking about the different things going on, metric system and those sort of things. We don't do that here. So
yeah. It's funny. I used to live in New York for a little while, just for a year or so, a couple of years. And, England is much, much smaller. So in 4 hours, you can drive pretty much to any part of England, more or less. And, but in America, people would drive 4 hours just to go and pick their friend up from like the airport or something like that. And that would blow my mind. It's pretty crazy that, 4 hours there, 4 hours back, no big deal. You could just do that in a day. Whereas for me, that's like going to the other part of the world, because it's, things are much smaller.
Yeah. Oh, I can relate to that. We've gone to Toronto to pick people up, and we're near Ottawa, right? So it's, 5 hours there, 5 hours back, right?
No big deal. I'll just come and pick you up.
Yeah. All good.
But I don't think 5 hours would get me from where I'm at.
But I just wanted to come back to something you were saying. Actually, something, Jim, you mentioned in the introduction to your book. And you were saying that meditation can help us during the really kind of difficult times and the stressful times and that sort of thing. But sometimes meditation for me feels so, it's so kind of, what you do in it, meditation itself can be quite difficult, but the actual steps to doing it, sitting quietly and breathing, seems so easy that it seems insignificant. So when you're going through a stressful time, to then say, I need to go and sit and breathe quietly in a room, just seems so silly that I actually find it quite difficult to justify it when I'm stressed out or something like that. When I'm feeling happy, I find it quite easy to go and meditate, because everything's cool. I can just go and chill and get quiet.
Yeah.
But how do you encourage people to justify doing it during those stressful times when probably you need it the most?
I would personally say that one of the big things I try to point out to people is meditation. Like I said earlier, is a very one of my favorite quotes is, it's an intimate experience with the present moment.
Yeah.
And I think every different form and flavor of the present moment is another opportunity to kind of see where you are and to see where things are trending. I think it really helps to allow you to like identify the current patterns of where you're going. And I think the best thing you can say to somebody is, just like you're taught, I think we're all probably taught in school to, when the bully pushes you, take a deep breath and count to 5 or whatever it is, to give you that disconnect from being in the emotion to being carried away with the emotion. Because let's be real, emotions are fleeting. They're always changing. And to me, I think that's just another opportunity to kind of sit and get objective with your life experience. And to me, I think, not that believe me, I'm not any kind of emotional master or anything like that. I still get mad. I still, occasionally I yell at my kids, still got to take care of some things when the time is calls for it. But I think it can really help you break those patterns when you look at it almost see it as each every time I come to meditation, it's almost like what is today's Jim get to see, or what do I get, what is going to unfold in front of me, because this is, the conditions are different every time. The session's bound to be different every time,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's about taking one step back from where you are. So you're not driven by your emotions, but you get to witness your emotions and kind of say, I'm not going to let this lead me into behaving or thinking something or feeling something. I'm just being objective and self-aware, and I'm not going to be um, subject to kind of outside influences. I'm going to let myself decide what goes on here and what happens.
Yeah, I have found in in times of trauma and in grief, sometimes, like for the longest time, I wasn't able to do like quiet meditation. But I knew that I needed it.
Yeah.
And so I would kind of switch it up a bit. Like I found yoga nidra really helped me because there was someone else who was leading the meditation, but I was going into my body.
So what is yoga nidra?
So it's sorry, excuse me.
That's okay.
Um, so it's a form of yoga done in meditation that essentially when you're doing it properly, it'll actually help you sleep.
Okay.
But you go into like a hypnagogic state, for lack of a better term. So you're able to stay present, but you're in your body rather than in your mind.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so what it does is it has you it's almost like an entire meditation that's being done as a body scan. So
Okay.
you're focusing on, your left thumb, your right, you go through each body part. And really intense ones will have you actually focusing on breathing through one nostril in
Yeah.
comparison to the other. Like you go through various layers in your body, and it helps with the visualization as well. Once you're getting into those different layers in your body, okay, let's visualize my calf muscle now.
Okay.
And yeah, it's so it helped me get out of my head and keep me in the moment when I just, like you said, can't sit
Yeah.
there because I'm, you know.
I've done some guided meditations with Tara Brach, and
Okay.
she does a lot of body scan meditations, which are very similar. And you kind of work your way around the body until you become a kind of whole physical. You become aware from the position of your entire body. So you become aware of what it feels like in your toes and what it feels like in your feet and then your legs. But rather than just individually, ultimately you build up to being aware from the perspective of your entire body. So you get this kind of field of awareness, which is really fascinating. And you have to really get in the zone for that to reach that point. But
Agreed. Yes, but it's amazing, right? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. When it works, it's fascinating. So
Yeah.
but sometimes I just can't stop thinking about work, about what I'm having for dinner, about when is my car need to be serviced, all this kind of stuff. It's hard to you bring yourself back, and you bring yourself back every time to the breath or the awareness or wherever you are in your body scan. And some days you just can't, you can't get there, no matter how hard you try.
Nope.
Yeah, but I guess
I
it's
think,
the
and that's another really cool point about the different approaches of meditation is it's almost like based on your temperament too. Like you said, like that. What you're describing sounds like a super intense. Like I can't if I go to the gym, I can barely do like two chin ups. I mean, it's something I can work at, but it's not something I have coming into the place.
yeah,
Um, so it depends on, like I said, you for that day. But yeah, that's a very intense and can be a very super intense practice. I mean, down into your toes, that's pretty that's getting
yeah.
hardcore.
Well, I mean, you
Yep.
start off with body scans in your book, and I find it a great way to kind of get because you hold stress in, I hold stress in my eyes. Some people hold it in their jaw, some people in their neck. We hold
Yeah.
stress in different parts of our bodies, and half the time we don't even realize, but a body scan is a great way to identify where we're holding stress. And then that in turn, you can use it for actually helping with physical ailments. You know, I've had stress manifest in stomach problems. I've had, you know, people regularly get headaches from stressful situations. And I guess meditation, when done well, can actually have physical benefits.
I believe that.
100% agree. 100% agree.
And it's this whole kind of thing again about mind, body, spirit. You know, people kind of dismiss meditation as being woo woo, but you know, you look at Neil Armstrong. He was taught meditation in order to remain calm under pressure, and it was necessary to land a module on the moon. You know, it's really vital. So in terms of
Absolutely.
in terms of your practice, I mean, you guys, you meditate every day?
I personally do in some form. It may not be, you know, with kids and work and like you said, you got to get the car serviced and breakfast made and those kind of things. I generally speaking, sometimes it may just be a mindfulness practice in on the car
Yeah.
ride to the store or to work, or it could be, you know, if I working on the unusual Buddha, I prefer like I guess you call it serenity meditation. That's generally what I call it, where you sit in the more traditional way and you just kind of chill. But yeah, I generally try to in some format once a day if possible.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I do as well, as much as I can. I like to do it before I go to bed. But if I'm not able to do it before I go to bed, I'll use like showering as an opportunity, because I use the visualization of the water to ground. So yeah.
that's interesting. So you've talked a couple of times about visualization, Nelly, and you've also described yourself as a head witch. Hedge witch, and hedge witch.
I
Yeah,
know, right? It's a
I know.
tongue.
And but I had to Google that when I heard that was how you described yourself, and it's kind of goes back to old times where the hedge is the divider between one plot of land and another plot of land, and so hedge witch is someone who's kind of half in one domain and half in another. So when you talk about visualizations, are you visualizing problems? Are you looking for solutions? How do you use visualizations in your meditation practice? What does it lead you?
Yeah, a lot of. Oh, okay. Hang on. Sorry.
That's all right. I think there's probably about 12 different questions.
Yeah, I'm
in
like,
there.
ooh, I don't talk about this a lot.
Now we get to find out the real Nelly.
Yeah,
I know.
let's get inside there. Let's
Here
unravel
it
a bowl of spaghetti. Let's find out where it goes.
Sorry.
Okay.
Well, when I first started the visualization practice, I was strictly using it to ground and center myself.
Okay.
So what a more common sort of grounding meditation is picturing yourself as a tree.
Okay.
And envisioning roots growing into the ground and tapping into Mother Earth's energy and drawing that energy up and pushing it out.
So you use this to kind of calm yourself, to regain your confidence, this kind of, you know, strength, your
Absolutely.
self-esteem, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Or,
You know, it's
yeah.
funny.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that's funny because that's actually very much like I think it's called Tonglen practice, where you very intensely visualize things. So that's really cool. I love having these conversations with Nelly because you find these like overlapping. Like wow, that's just like this. You know what I mean? This is very cool. This is amazing. So yeah, I'm sorry. I just had to.
Oh, that's cool.
No, that is cool. I think that's so awesome. I didn't know that. That's really cool. Like the other way that because a lot of my practice is ancestor worship, so honoring those who came before me.
Mm-hmm.
What I will do is use visualizations to get in touch with that ancestor energy.
Yeah. And
And
what do you get out of that? What's the purpose of that kind of visualization?
well, for me, again, it's going into yourself.
Yeah.
And so you are digging again, going into yourself to get answers, and to get support. And also by saying, just acknowledging those energies because, hey, you're around and thank you,
Yeah.
you know, and I draw into that energy for my practice and my workings. Yeah.
So it's funny. We talk about meditation in a way of kind of taking pause, slowing down, finding a moment in the day where we can just have a break from whatever it is we're feeling, whatever it is we're kind of having to deal with today, or whatever stresses are facing us. But there is also a kind of way of using it perhaps to explore our perspective on the world. So, um, reconnect with maybe, nature and the view outside the window, take a moment to taste our food, and really kind of engage with life in that kind of way. Do you think when people have a kind of meditation practice that the life becomes a little bit richer, a little bit more meaningful?
100%. 100%. That's I think probably one of the more powerful things that I personally have found with my practice is that there's so much more to every moment when you kind of come off that autopilot. When you kind of come off, it seems like a lot of times I feel like, and again, this is me from my perspective. I feel like a lot of times we tend to mail it in. You know what I mean? We tend to kind of go through the motions of things when sunsets are beautiful and bird songs are awesome, and you know what I mean, like holding your child is amazing, and you know what I mean, like there's a lot of things that are very much more satisfying when you actually stop and take them in and allow yourself to really appreciate them. And I think that that's another thing that meditation can do. Again, not that we're aiming for things, but this is, I feel like it's one of those, I like to call them happy side effects. And I feel like that's another one of the happy side effects that you really get to appreciate. Like that's what oatmeal tastes like. You know what I mean? Like as weird as that sounds, it's just, that's the experience of oatmeal. It's a lot different than just, stuffing it in your gob there. It's an actual experience.
And what's funny, I think, is that there's a whole generation of people who are discovering this now. People like you, people like me, we're finding we're able to engage with our lives a lot more and get a lot more satisfaction from our lives. But the poets wrote about this 1,000 years ago. This is nothing new. We're just rediscovering conversations like this have happened for thousands of years. What does it mean to you? The Stoics probably talked about this. The Greek philosophers probably talked about it. The Sufis, they all talked about it. And why is it now suddenly becoming such a big deal? Why has it been so kind of um, you know marginalized for all this time? When it would have been that the meditators were the shaman in the temples. They were the wise men. But then it became something that was a little bit kind of strange and a little bit unusual. And that guy meditates. You don't want to talk to him because he's a weirdo. Where did that when did that ever happen? Do you think it was the Industrial Revolution? Do you think we got so trapped in this whole kind of acquisition of money and stuff and all this kind of superficialities of life that are now the big deal? Where do you think
My
we lost track? Sorry, carry on.
my my personal feeling is that I'd say even within the medieval times there was this fear of mysticism,
Yeah.
and yet mysticism controlled their lives. Myth and mysticism controlled their lives, but there was still that deep, genuine fear of anything magical. And I don't know. I don't think it has anything to do with one particular belief. I think it was just a way of controlling people, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I think it just kind of de-evolved into there. And then as we entered the Industrial Revolution, we became more and more detached, you know, from nature, from ourselves. And I think now that we're starting to you know more about how the brain works and understand, you know, the neurological benefits of spirituality and having, you know, a daily ritual in your life. I feel that science has kind of contributed to that, because people are now understanding that we need these connections in order to flourish. Like you said, the mind, body, spirit connection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like you know, at one time, science and spirituality were the same thing. You know, you had the alchemists who were trying to, you know, create things from nothing. They were messing around with chemicals. They were trying to, you know, turn ordinary metals into gold and that kind of thing. But they were deeply connected with the clergy and priests and all this kind of stuff. They were here, and then science went off here and spirituality went off there, and now they're coming back together again in a way. It's like, you know, that it's all
Yeah.
kind
Yeah,
of different
absolutely.
sides of the same thing.
I just wanted to add to that real fast. My personal opinion, where it kind of went off the rails, would be when we actually gave up. It seems like society as a whole, we went from this time, like you said, shamans and the village elders, where we kind of had like, there was a very much a personal connection to whatever is bigger than your physical person. And it seems like over time, and I guess it was a gradual thing, really. It seems, because I'm not a history expert, but it seems like we eventually kind of gave that up to people coming along, that all of a sudden we felt we needed to have some sort of intermediary between us and divinity, or us and the ether, or whatever you believe in. I think that's where it kind of started, was we kind of gave up that personal relationship with things greater than us. I think that's a big point of where we almost gave up that, like, we had the power and then we just gave it up. You know what I mean? Like, we just let other people have it. I think now, with people starting to realize that, you know, and again, this isn't to pick on any specific sect or anything like that, but there are times, like, you go to church and you just don't feel good. You know what I mean? You don't. We shouldn't do this every Sunday. We shouldn't mourn our faith. We shouldn't. You know, it shouldn't be, oh, you know, church. It should, you know, if it should be something you're feeling. And I think we're starting to get back to that. We're starting to realize, I don't need that guy standing up there on the tall pulpit to tell me what is. I can read the book. I can look inward. I can sit with it. I can ruminate, whatever you want to call it, and develop that relationship. And I think that's where we're getting back to, is people are not afraid to embrace that, like, maybe it's a little weird, but it's mine. You know what I mean? Like, I think people are starting to get to, we're getting like a confidence level boost, I guess, at a base level for most people.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in a way, religion kind of hijacked our relationship with nature and the world we live in. And it said, you know, and I find this with Buddhism as well. For me, Buddhism is about your own interpretation of what the Buddha said. But then you kind of start to get into the dogma, and it's like, well, you're not a Buddhist unless you do this, and you're not a Christian unless you do this, and you're not a Catholic unless you do this. And it's like, well, how about I'm just whatever I am, and I have my personal relationship with existence and with myself, and whether that means, you know, I worship a man floating on a cloud, or whether I just kind of, you know, I am connected somehow to the world around me. You know, leave that to me. That's my kind of, it's personal, you know, and it's intimate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, the world's big enough for that, you know, like everything, existence is large enough to, you know, have, everyone can kind of have it however you see it. I mean, it's really no way to prove it right or wrong, you know, so have your own, you know. Doesn't make sense to pigeonhole it or define it in a certain way.
No, exactly. And I think as well that there's I can't remember who the poet was, but they said, as soon as you call a tree and tell a child that that's what it is, you will forever spoil it from being anything else. You know, and as soon as you give a bird a name, that's it. It will always just be that word.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, and it's the same with how you feel and your connection. As soon as you say, this is what spirituality is, and this is what, you know, all of these things are, then you stop them from being anything else. You kind of narrow down that ability to explore and to do that. And yeah, I think it's important that we nurture that again, so that we can be well and healthy and fulfill our potential, really.
Absolutely, and that's funny because that's a very I'm sure I'll probably misquote it, but that's a very like, Buddhist concept, and that's the idea of nothingness. Is that if you really look at anything, it's a compound. It's not. There is no car. It's a compilation of parts that we agreed is a car. You know what I mean? There is no uh, gym. There's just a pile of things that we happen to call gym. It's not really. There's no gym there. You know what I mean? Like there's. It doesn't mean that because I have a brain and eyes and all this, like biological tissue doesn't mean that it's never happened anywhere else. You know what I mean? Like that's a very interesting concept is that it's like you said, once you have defined it, you've almost placed all the limitations on it.
Yeah, completely. And I guess that's what's so liberating about meditation. When you step into awareness, which I guess is what we are, and you're able to see your emotions and you see your thinking, and then you see yourself seeing all of these things, and you become more and more abstracted from it all, then you start to see that, you know, like you were saying, you know, I'm made of all these parts, these atoms, these cells, and in fact the whole of everything is just a big sea of atoms and cells and components and parts all floating together, and we're all a part of that, you know. I suppose that's where non-duality comes into all of this, and that's another
Yeah.
conversation for another time. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a whole nother world there. But absolutely, I totally agree. Like we're one of my favorite analogies that from Buddhism is people ask, and I've had friends ask this. Well, after the Buddha attained enlightenment, did he go to heaven? Like what happened to him? And one of the best analogies I've found, and again, this is probably a gross misquote, but it's what I drew from it. But he talked about the phenomena of a fire. He
yeah,
said, imagine when a person attains enlightenment, imagine like a fire, like if the fire burned down to the very last little bits of fuel there, and you just threw it, and it scattered. That particular fire is gone, but it doesn't mean that fire can't happen anywhere else in the world ever again. That you know what I mean? Like the conditions are still there. It's still possible to have a fire. That phenomena could still take place. It's just this specific one is done. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And that I think is a very powerful, like you said, abstraction. It almost kind of like, wow, what if I'm just a process? You know what I mean? Like I think that's a neat concept to me. That's something like you said, when you get more objective and you step back, hands, these are my feelings, these are my thoughts. When you step back from that, you're like, wow, like there's, you know what I mean? There's more behind this. You know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely. So Nelli, but I'm going to bring this back eventually to talking about kind of the practical aspects of meditation. But I'd like to kind of get into the idea of exploring other worlds, if you like, through imagination, through visions, and just spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about that before we finish up. But so
Okay.
Nelli, I'm just really intrigued by this whole idea of being a hedge witch. And
Okay.
I think it's great. I think it's just the idea of kind of having one foot in one place and another foot in another place, and using visions as a kind of practical aspect of your daily life to connect with other ideas and notions. And how much of it do you think is actually connecting with something inside you, and how much of it is connecting to something beyond you?
I think it's both.
Yeah,
The foundation. Sorry. Ugh.
that's okay.
So sorry. The foundation of this particular path is knowing yourself,
Yeah,
and so before you can do anything, and dive deeper into this practice, it's all about working on you. and becoming self-aware of your feelings and what's inside. So my personal feeling, like when it comes to, you know, when it comes to divination, when it comes to you know, working with various energies, it's all about you, really.
Yeah.
Not to sound selfish, but because it's not, it's working internally in order to, you know, obtain that connection. So it's a full circle process. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
so. Yeah. So in a way,
And
it's you're using your internal energies to kind of connect with energies that are around you, and then
absolutely.
they feed each other, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you're, you know, like I said, I work with, you know, my ancestors, and you know, other people work with guides, right? But all of that, again, it's very internal, and it's very personal.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, it kind of ties full circle into what you were saying earlier, that this is a very, you know, spirituality is very personal and, yeah, and
Yeah.
individual, you know.
What if so just to kind of bring it back to where we were at the beginning, so talking about the kind of practical nature of meditation, what if I'm a career man and I'm not interested in, you know, connecting with the infinite or exploring exploring who I am or my ancestors or my connection with nature. I just want to get better at doing what I'm doing and, you know, stop being so afraid all the time of speaking to my boss or going for that promotion, or, you know, how can it help us to just get better at living day to day? I mean, do you
Ooh,
think?
who's going to go first on this one? This is
Yeah,
exciting.
I'm
There's so
like,
many. We're both chomping at the bit here.
yeah.
I would say my personal background when I was really started to get into meditation, I was a mechanic, you know, just a normal automotive, you know, spark plugs and diagnosing codes kind of mechanic. And, you know, it's fixing Honda Civics and stuff like that. And it's very much it, something I could do very simply, you know, just by mindfully feeling out the process. And it was surprising how much I was able to kind of come to terms with what was happening as far as the fears and the I guess feelings of inadequacy, like, you know, why should I be talking to my boss, or why am I worth a raise? You know, that when you start, I feel like when you start to understand those processes going on inside you, you kind of start to place a little bit of value on, you know, who you are and what you were per se worth. You know, I don't mean that to like some are worth more than others. I just mean as far as like you have value.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's a big thing. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a big deal. We don't have to like light incense in the office and sweep all the crap off the desk and sit on it, you know, in a full lotus position with our mudras and however you want to hold your hands. You don't have to do all that. You can just literally push away from the desk and, or, you know, close the laptop and just close your eyes and take like 5 deep breaths and come back to it. More or less, you know, it's almost rejuvenating when you kind of get into a rhythm of it. I find that it tends to lessen the like you said, the drive of fear, which I think makes a better leader. It makes a better certainly makes a person more inspiring of faith from others as far as your worth and your ability to complete a task. And, you know, sometimes it even helps you down to finding the borders of what you can handle. You know what I mean? Like it's when you are present in yourself, you start to realize, okay, 5 tasks are all I can handle. And
Yeah.
it's you know, you start to find the edges of where things are, and then you can sort of work on expanding, or at least, you know, getting to feel out those borders, those edges. And, you know, it tends to I think it does actually increase, I guess, if you're going to put it in a professional sense, the soft skills too, as far as being empathetic to others, sympathetic, you know, those kind of things. I think it helps us identify with others also, to be kind of more aware of where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
sorry, carry on,
I
Nelly.
oh sorry. Yeah, I just sort of add on to that. You don't have to do it for, 30 minutes, an hour a day. It can be just as simple as sitting at, during your lunch break for 5 minutes, right? And building from there. It doesn't, yeah, you know, incense is nice, but I don't think your coworkers would appreciate it.
Yeah.
So
Because
yeah,
we're
it's
not in Nag Champa, Maybe I'm in Nag Dragon's Blood. Who knows?
yeah,
I've got
yeah. So
I've got spiritual aura right here.
Oh,
oh
that's what I'm
yeah,
talking about. Nag Champa. Nag
yeah,
Champa. It's
So
between that and Dragon's Blood for me. I'm very close on either.
I haven't tried the dragon's blood yet. I ordered a big selection box of about 12 different flavors. So dragon's blood
Nice.
next. Yeah.
yeah.
Very nice.
Cool. Well, I need to kind of wrap things up a little bit because we're in lockdown at the moment. Everyone's stuck at home. So I don't know if you've heard, but my little baby daughter has just been having a dinner downstairs, and my wife has very generously accommodated my request for some time to do a podcast. And I'll need to go and give her evening bath before we put her to bed in a minute. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to finish up. So your book, Jim, The Practical Meditation Journal.
Yeah.
I was amazed when I saw how many different types of meditations there were, and you've kind of listed them all. And it's a workbook as well, isn't it? The book.
Yeah, like a journal. So it kind of, I guess the idea was to try and coax a little more from you in each thing, if that makes sense. It's about establishing a habit and making sure you're not autopiloting through it.
And have you had a good response to it so far?
For by and large, it was certainly an experience as far as it's the first time I've actually had to do the unusual Buddha type stuff for somebody. So it was definitely a sort of a clash a little bit with the editors, and they're like, well, it should sound like this, it should sound like that. By and large, the response has been pretty good, but I think I saw you liked it earlier on Twitter. I posted a negative review of this is the very terrible choice. Bias. Like, well, it is what it is. It wasn't. I didn't sell it in any specific way that you were going to get something out of it. It's a book. You know what I mean? Like, what do you want from me? So I did that because I thought it was at the time. I thought it was funny. I'm staying up late with my kids, and at the time I thought it was a riot. So by and large, the response has been pretty good. But of course, anytime you put yourself out there, you put things and feelings and your ideas on paper, there's always going to be critics.
Well, I mean, it's like when Brené Brown says, and I think she was quoting one of the presidents, probably Roosevelt, when you step into the arena, you're going to get a kicking. And that
absolutely
goes with the territory, and I guess when you're open about something like meditation as well, and you probably get people kind of thinking, have you had a breakdown or something? What's going on with this, I'm sure when I started talking about it, I think people did think I'd, had some kind of, breakdown or trauma or something like that. But, and I guess for me, it was a bit of a response to something like that. But yeah, I mean, you don't need to go through difficult times to kind of find this practice, I don't think.
Not at all. And that's I think that's probably the big whole conversation is it's available to everyone all. You can, like you said, like we talked about earlier, it's add depth and breadth and width to your experience at all times for anybody at any place. You don't have to go to Sri Lanka. You don't have to, live, laugh, learn in India or whatever. You know what I mean? Like Live, Laugh, Love or whatever the book was. You don't have to do that in far off places. Your experience at your desk can be profound. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, if people want to find out more about the unusual Buddha, what's the best way to go about it?
The best way to go about it would be theunusualbuddha.com. We try to keep all the most pertinent or the newest things on the front page so people can check us out. But we're all available pretty much across social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the good places to hang out. Trying to dabble in TikTok, but I'm a little bit afraid because it's I feel like I'm double the age of the average person there. Oh no, you two are I can see you guys making faces.
Yeah,
We're
I
gonna
No.
I don't know you
Not
understand
doing
it.
that. No,
Nelly.
no. Nope.
It's
No.
where they are. It's where the people are.
It's for the young people. Yeah, no. I mean, I can barely operate Zoom and my laptop, so I think TikTok is just forget about it. You know.
That
that's
ship
cool.
has sailed.
Oh yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. And
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It's really been great to be with you and talk to you for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we've been chatting on Twitter and stuff for a while, but
Yeah.
just great to be able to get into. You know, it's flown by. We've probably spent an hour now, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, really. But you know, it's really, I think, a good introduction for meditation for people who perhaps have never tried it or have given it a go and might want to find out more. So, really appreciate it. So, thanks a lot. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I found that to be a really enjoyable conversation. And I thought we could have gone a lot further. You know, we could have gone on for hours. But, you know, like most people, I have a life and I'm under time pressures. I have a full-time job as well. And I needed to bath my daughter. So, so there we go. We've brought it to an end. And I'd like to explore this in further episodes and see where it can take us. But this podcast is all about kind of building your own life and, you know, finding your own way and creating your dream life, if you like. So I hope that you will be encouraged to try meditation and that you enjoyed this podcast. And we've got many more lined up. So keep them peeled. Subscribe if you like. Rate and review. Give it 5 stars. And yeah, hope you enjoyed that and see you next time.